Hello again. Welcome to Firki's webinar on why empathy is crucial in our post-COVID world in partnership with Roots of Empathy. I am Anu and I work as a course designer with the Firki team. Today I will be helping you navigating through the webinar. We will now watch a short video that will help us get introduced to the Firki website and its features. I request Bala to kindly play the video.
The Firki website offers a diverse set of content for teachers to support them in their professional development as well as in their classrooms, and is free of charge and easy to use. In order to access the portal, type firki.co and you will be directed to the Firki website. To register on Firki, fill in a brief registration form. You can also sign in through your Google account. You will have to use your email ID in order to create an account on our website. This account is again free to create and use. Once you create your account and log in with your credentials, you will be directed to the dashboard. The dashboard would have notifications related to your profile, course progress, time spent, and your Firki discussion groups. To access different pedagogical courses, you can click on the courses link on the top left of the screen. The courses page allows you to choose courses based on difficulty level and category. The courses are also available in different regional languages. Feel free to browse the different courses we have in our catalog using the search bar above. Each Firki course is designed using the FITS model that stands for Feel, Imagine, Do, and Share. The Feel section of the course helps you identify your current practices. The Imagine section defines the practices that one should follow to improve teaching and learning outcomes. A detailed description of strategies are highlighted under the Do section that one can implement in the classroom and with their students. At last, the Share section talks about ways in which one can share their learnings with each other. Each course has also a set of reflection questions as part of the assessment section. Along with the course material, each Firki course also contains a learning circle plan and journal pages. A learning circle plan helps the coaches and mentors conducting the offline learning circles to discuss and share learnings from the course. A journal page summarizes the course with important points. We are adding new courses every month, so keep watching this space. Next up, we have the webinars page that is also accessible from the top left of the screen. On this page, you will find information about the upcoming webinars. If you scroll down, you will find a bunch of resources from our older webinars. These resources will include video recordings of the webinar itself, notes from the webinar, the presentation used by our speaker, and other resources on the topic covered. Do feel free to browse this section at your leisure. The final page to look out for is the resources page, also to be found at the top left corner of your screen. This page houses and will house resources from several of our partner organizations, such as the British Council, Khan Academy, Storyweaver, Pratham Books, and more. We are in the process of adding to the list, and you can easily filter resources by partners, grades or standard, and the subject of instruction. We hope you find value in using these resources in your practice as teachers and educators. Finally, you can find the Firki app on the Play Store and can access these courses, resources, and webinars through your phone. So download our app and stay connected to teaching and learning on the go.
I hope the video helped you in knowing more about Firki. If you have any questions around any of the features highlighted in the video, please write to us at contactfirki@teach4india.org. The link to the same will be posted on the chat window shortly. With that, let's move on to the webinar at hand today. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this discussion. In designing this and other webinars throughout the year, the Firki team is hoping that we can disseminate meaningful knowledge and skill that takes us closer to our goal of improving the quality of education in Indian classrooms. In today's webinar, we will gain an understanding of the genesis of empathy and its impact on human development and happiness, as well as the cultivation of a civil society. We will gain an insight into the relationship of violence and the absence of empathy, We will also learn about the role that research plays in understanding the effectiveness of the Roots of Empathy program around the world. We will also understand the impact of the Roots of Empathy program on children. Now, let me introduce the speakers for the day. We have with us Mary Gordon and Sara Lane today. Mary Gordon is an award-winning social entrepreneur, educator, author, parenting expert, and child advocate who has created an international children's charity, Roots of Empathy. The Roots of Empathy program's impact has been proven by independent research on 3 continents to reduce aggression and bullying in childhood and increase children's pro-social behavior with the impact lasting over time. She consults and speaks internationally to organizations as diverse as the United Nations, the WHO, and has had dialogues with the Dalai Lama. Sara Lane is currently the Manager of Research and Curriculum Development at Roots of Empathy. Sara has a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology, a Bachelor's of Education, and a Master's of Science in Psychology. She currently manages the research and curriculum team and has contributed to numerous research projects at Roots of Empathy. Sara began her career as an elementary and special educator and has recently dedicated her time to providing professional development for teachers. She has a passion for supporting the learning and well-being of students and teachers everywhere. This brings me to the norms of the webinar today. As mentioned earlier, please use the raise hands feature if the speaker asks a question and we will unmute you to answer. Please type in all your questions in the question and answers window and also respond in the chat window whenever necessary. Do remember that learning new things is often difficult, but challenge yourself and reflect on your thinking and experiences today. The best way to remember something is to write or discuss your learning with someone after the webinar. So do take notes throughout. The webinar will be recorded and will be available on YouTube and the Firki website soon. Compliant to the privacy policies of Roots of Empathy, the speaker presentation deck today will not be shared. With that, we would like to showcase this disclaimer again for today's webinar. Please note that all information and materials shared by the speakers today are the property of Roots of Empathy or third parties and are protected by copyright, trademark, patent, and other intellectual property laws. Roots of Empathy reserves all rights in such information and materials subject only to the license. You are not permitted to republish material from this webinar, which includes republication on any other platform. You cannot reproduce, duplicate, copy, sell, or otherwise exploit material shared for a commercial purpose without Roots of Empathy's express written consent. You cannot edit or otherwise modify any material shared in the webinar today. With that, I now request Mary and Sara to begin the session. Thank you.
And thank you to 100 for connecting me to Teach for India and Firki, and it's a delight to be here with you. I think the world we're living in today is a world that none of us recognize. We're making it up as we go. And it's fraught with insecurity. It's typical here in many parts of the world. We're preparing to send children back to school. It's quite typical that little children would be anxious about starting school again, a new school year. Will I have any friends? It's not typical that adults would be worried, that parents would be scared that sending their children back to school might make them sick. So we are not just dealing with a pandemic of coronavirus. We are dealing with a pandemic of uncertainty, of fear, insecurity, compounded by a parallel, I would say, pandemic of loneliness and disconnection. All of this is fixable. All of this is understandable. And I think what's required more than any one quality or attribute is empathy. And when I say empathy, I mean the ability to understand how another person feels and to be able to feel with them. There are 2 aspects of empathy. There's the cognitive aspect, which most people are familiar with. It's the ability to take the cognitive perspective of the other. That's cognitive empathy, but affective empathy is less well understood. It's the ability to understand emotion, to recognize it in yourself and to recognize it in others. So the affective aspect of empathy is crucial. And that's what Roots of Empathy particularly focuses on. We call it emotional literacy. And the whole approach of Roots of Empathy is to break intergenerational cycles of violence, to be able to find a way to connect us one to the other in the world. And we see childhood as the solution to the world's problems, not the genesis of them. So what is the genesis of empathy? My thesis a long time ago was that we're innately predisposed to be empathic, but it is in the context of the first year or so of life, in the relationship of the parent or the parents with the little baby, that empathy either thrives or fades. And that is how we have orchestrated the Roots of Empathy program, which brings a tiny baby and a parent into a classroom over the whole school year. And the children in that classroom are coached by a Roots of Empathy instructor who we train, a curriculum that is age specific for the group we're using. And the children over the course of the school year are coached to observe how they think the baby is feeling and what they think the baby's intentions are. So that really covers both the cognitive and the affective aspects of empathy. But empathy can't be taught in traditional instructional ways like we would teach mathematics. I'm an old school teacher, so I have great respect for what happens in the hallowed halls of our schools. But empathy is something that is rather caught than taught. And it is caught experientially. Children experience empathy in the loving attention from the parent and of all the senses that babies interpret, how they are loved and cherished. Touch is the most powerful. The thing is, babies don't understand our words, but they understand what is behind them. And human touch is the most powerful vehicle for helping a person feel human, feel loved, feel connected, helping us deal with all of the various challenges in the outside world. If we have, through human touch, the confidence and the connection to one another, we are well suited in the world. So this little baby who comes to the school, to one particular classroom, is more or less adopted by that classroom, and the children gather around a green blanket, and every child is treated with respect. Our goals for the children are to help them become less aggressive, help them really understand their classmates, to be able to read the emotional cues of their classmates, to be able to be conversant about their own emotions, how they are feeling. And we are living in a world that is emotionally illiterate. We may have put man on the moon in the 60s. We may have plumbed the depths of the oceans. We've not yet begun to plumb the depths of the human heart. We've made a massive amount of gains in neuroscience. And the good news story here in neuroscience is that cognition and emotion in the brain are very closely connected, inextricably connected in infancy. And that we now know in education that in order to teach a child well, you first must reach them. And that's what Roots of Empathy does in a very big way. We help teachers observe how we can reach students by being able to emotionally connect with them. So the whole Roots of Empathy pedagogy is really a pedagogy of hope, because we are helping children know themselves and be able to reach out and know the other. The loneliness and disconnection in the world is our enemy. We have found in this pandemic that we have more in common in the universe than we have differences. And we have never before been collectively concerned about something with which we don't have much power to fix. So this imbalance of power, whether it's around money or whatever the imbalance is, we have a chance to build an egalitarian society through recognizing that we are all equally vulnerable and we need one another in the world. We work on this idea of interconnection. We work on this idea in the classroom that we are one of a family in that classroom. And everybody's happiness depends on the happiness of the other. And when children cultivate empathy, they do have that capacity to understand how the other feels and to feel with them. Not just to be an armchair empath, but to be, to have empathy action is what we call it. And we talk to the children about having moral courage, because it's not too difficult to recognize when something is unfair. Children are brilliant at that. But to have the moral courage to do something about it is something else. And we have seen courageous examples of this in the children in classrooms across 3 continents. We have worked with children as young as 5 and as old as 13, and we have seen heroic examples. And this has been over a 24-year history. So it's not about the language children speak. It's not about the socioeconomic circumstances in which they live. It's not about their culture. It's not about geography. It's about humanity. And I'd like to share with you a picture that a little 7-year-old boy has drawn. We very often ask children in Roots of Empathy to use art as a way to express themselves, because it's hard for little children to find words to explain how they feel, particularly their vulnerable feelings. And in Roots of Empathy, we speak to children about understanding their power as a person who can make things fair. You can't fix everything in the world, and it's not your responsibility, but you can be a changer, as we call them. If something seems unfair to you, that you have an opportunity to do something about it in the moment. And I want to share a picture with you of a little boy called Ricky, that when he was asked in his Roots of Empathy class, would you make a picture about a time that you were able to help somebody? And we come from a position of intrinsic motivation in Roots of Empathy. We only ask questions of children. We don't praise their responses in any way. We thank them for their contribution. And the idea in this is vulnerable children, whether they're vulnerable because they feel that they don't have enough information or they don't express themselves well, nobody has asked them questions or been interested in their opinion at home, whether they stutter, whether they don't speak the language of instruction, whatever it might be. Some children don't contribute in the classroom. They're nervous that they might be wrong and be ridiculed. In the Roots of Empathy classroom, everybody contributes because there's no judgment. And praise is actually a positive judgment, but what it means is the adult's opinion is one of judgment. And if you're praised in 1 minute, it could just as easily turn to criticism. And really, praise is something that in a home or in an individual family situation is powerful. But it's not so powerful, it's destructive in a group learning situation. So here's a picture of my little friend Ricky, who I actually didn't meet. And Ricky said he, when his friend was scared on the slide, he was able to help him. And here's a story Ricky gave us behind this picture, that there was a very big slide in the school ground. And his friend was afraid of heights and he'd never gone up on the big slide. And it was recess time, so all of the children are in the playground and maybe 1 or 2 teachers. And Ricky's little friend got the courage to climb up the slide. And when he got to the top of the slide, he had a panic attack and he couldn't go down. And he was sort of frozen there on the top of the slide. So there were children on the ladder waiting for their turn. Recess is short when you want to have a turn on the slide. So the children at the bottom of the slide were throwing pebbles, shouting at Ricky, "Come on down, come on down." And the children on the ladder are saying, "Go down, I want to turn." And Ricky couldn't move. So his little friend went over to the slide and told the children on the ladder, "Come down, I want to go up and help my friend." And they did. They recognized power. They all came down, and Ricky went up and he put his legs around his friend and he said, "We'll go down together." That word together opens up a world of courage. That word together is what we should be thinking together. Now, every child in that playground who saw Ricky do that saw a hero. That little friend he helped knew a friend is someone who understands you and will help you. A friend is somebody who has empathy for you. And in this world, there is an armada of broken hearts in every classroom. And if you have a friend who you know will back you up, you can learn, because we're not free to learn until really children need to be emotionally regulated. And unless you feel someone has your back, it's hard to let down your guard and open your mind and heart to learning. So in our classrooms today, to realize that children's emotional situation, their emotional regulation, is one of the biggest factors in their being freed up to learn. And that until teachers have the capacity to relate to the students, to be in a positive relationship with the students, that is probably their biggest tool. We have all kinds of curricular help, and I saw at the beginning of the show wonderful opportunities to get support in technology. The biggest help you have is yourself. As a teacher, your capacity to be in relationship with a child is the biggest door opener to their learning and to your satisfaction. So let me show you another picture, because art really is the poetry of children's souls. It paints pictures of their pain and their possibility. Here's a little person who you can't see his tiny writing at the bottom of the picture, but what it says is, try not to get mad at a baby because he might learn to be mean when he grows up. So that is a picture to me which speaks to the intergenerational cycle of violence. And Roots of Empathy tries to break that cycle of violence. When I started Roots of Empathy 24 years ago, I started because I was aware from the families I had been working with, where there was a great deal of domestic violence and child abuse, sexual abuse as well, that the common denominator in all of that suffering was the absence of empathy. So then my next problem was, okay, how do we cultivate empathy? And realizing that empathy can't be taught, but it could be caught through that attachment relationship between the parent and baby, which is where I believed empathy grew. So that's where Roots of Empathy was born, bringing the attachment relationship to school, because all of our children in developed countries go to school. And if you want to change the world, we can do that, child by child. If they develop empathy, that will be their backpack to change the future. So this little boy realized, look at the power dynamic there of the adult shouting at a little baby who's crying, the vulnerability of that baby. And for that young boy to realize that how we treat our babies today is the kind of society we can expect tomorrow, that gave me more hope, because children do learn through metaphor. They don't have to have the words for the metaphor, but they absolutely understand metaphor. So this idea of the world our children are growing up in today, it is for them at the moment filled with stress and anxiety. They are dysregulated. And it is the job of the adults to not fuel that, but to help unpack that by helping children find a way to self-regulate. And that is something we have all our, different strategies to do it. But one of the things is being able to speak with children, not to them, but with them about how they are feeling. And teachers do this brilliantly, and we need to give them more support in doing it. So much of our instruction is online in these days, but even online, we have the capacity to share with children how we are feeling. Because adults are models for children, and they watch all the time what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're not doing, what we're not saying, what we choose to turn a blind eye to. All of these things children observe. So their way of knowing isn't just by hearing. But to say to a child, how are you feeling today? That is probably the best opening to any lesson that we have. And in Roots of Empathy, our agenda is how are you feeling? How is the baby feeling? And that idea is powerful, and children will tell us. So to be able to share with a child that you feel sometimes confused yourself, to be able to answer their questions honestly, to encourage their questions, is giving them courage to say how they are feeling. Because if you can't get through that, you can't break through to learning. And I think this idea of empathy, being able to connect to another's feelings and to be able to care, the ethic of care needs to be on the front burner, not on the back burner in our lives. So I've been asked to share with you, how did Roots of Empathy scale? And Roots of Empathy scaled because people asked us to bring it to them. Not through an advertising campaign, not through marketing, but through teachers, really. Because the teachers who host Roots of Empathy in their classroom, they don't teach it, they host it. They are the ones who saw the changes in their children. And the teaching pipeline is a very powerful pipeline or network. So Roots of Empathy started in Toronto in Canada, and we then grew to every single province in Canada, and then to many other countries and many other languages. But I think what's universal in Roots of Empathy is the power of the classroom to raise the ceiling of hope in the world. That what happens in our classrooms today, the children of today are the leaders of tomorrow, they are the policymakers of tomorrow, and they are the parents of tomorrow. So we need to put our faith and our hope in the children and our time and our best learning into cultivating an empathic generation of children who will move the needle on what a civil society is. A civil society is one where everybody has voice. And in the Roots of Empathy classroom, we help children build consensus. We have experiences them to build consensus, because if you don't learn to collaborate when you're in school, if you only learn to compete, if grades and titles are all that matter, we're going to have a failed society tomorrow. So the ability for children when they're in school to be able to regulate their emotions, to be able to connect to the other, bodes well for a good society for tomorrow. So this whole idea of independence in society, I think, is overrated. The idea of interdependence is something that is going to help us carve out a society where we make sure we include the vulnerable. And when little children in the Roots of Empathy program connect to the vulnerability of a baby, they find that there's someone who's even more vulnerable than they are. And this idea of buying our way into the future is something that is not attainable. We will be able to share our way into the future. And if children realize in their classrooms that sharing makes you happier than being powerful, those concepts are going to be more acceptable for how they look at their way in the future. I think in every classroom, we've got emotional shrapnel flying around. And teachers are aware of that. They're aware that children have suffered emotional blows, that not every child is working on a full tank. But what sometimes we don't realize is that other children in the classroom have the capacity to see and to feel that and to do something about it. So the idea of helping one another is really powerful in the Roots of Empathy class. So, we may be winning the war on child mortality, but we need to be winning the war on connecting one another in society and making sure that children start their day on a full tank and recognizing the power of children to help children. So this idea of a crisis of connection is not just something that is in the adult world, that we in this modern world are lonely, that this pandemic of loneliness is robbing us of happiness, that this is a solvable problem, but we have to cultivate empathy in order to solve that problem. So they do say in Roots of Empathy that we are able to get under the skin of the baby, to really understand the baby. And for children to have that visceral experience, it lasts them a lifetime. And the whole thing about empathy being the common denominator in the presence of violence and cruelty, that is a massive understanding. This, the disappearance of empathy in many places can be recultivated through children. They don't just experience empathy in their Roots of Empathy classroom. They go home, they go to the playground, they go to the neighborhood, they grow up, they become us. So there is a generational win on helping children cultivate empathy and addressing this emotional illiteracy in the world. Leadership, if you look at the leadership in the world, the destructiveness of leaders who don't have empathy, leaders who cannot relate to the I and thou, as Martin Buber would say, leaders who don't care about a civil society, they care about power. So true leadership happens in childhood. And leadership isn't always about the traditional sense of power, but leadership is being able in the playground to be a Ricky and to show that your empathy for your friend eclipses the embarrassment of people making fun of you, eclipses all of the reasons why you would not respond. We see models of cowardice every day. We see people who see cruelty but don't have the courage to stand up and say something. We see cruelty and the absence of empathy in staff rooms and offices. But in that playground, to see a 7-year-old whose empathy gave him the moral courage to stand up against cruelty, to stand up for what's fair and for what's right, to help his friend, that to me is completely encouraging. So I think this idea of breaking intergenerational cycles of violence is something that is on the agenda for all of us. And the idea of being able to recognize that every child is born for love, and that we can create the kind of world where every child has the right to be included, to feel a sense of belonging, to believe that their opinion is as worthwhile as somebody else's, to find their voice before they leave school, not to have to be silent and to feel worthless. This has nothing to do with world's goods, with money. This has to do with how do we give children a sense of their humanity when they come to our schools. Schools are really our ministry of peace, our ministry of justice, our ministry of health, because violence is a public health issue. And the idea of poor mental health and the pandemic we have of hopelessness, the pandemic we have of children not having a sense of well-being, it is achievable to break that. Children's sense of well-being comes through one another and the adults in their lives. So we have in Roots of Empathy a chance to look at Van Gogh's Starry Skies and Haystacks, the idea that children can see hope, the idea that Eric Clapton sings about drowning in a river of tears. It's unconscionable that we would allow children to be drowning in a river of tears, that their fears and their anxieties are only known to them. We can reach out through children. Adults can't do this. Adults can empower children to do this. We have to step back. In Roots of Empathy, we take a Socratic method. We don't give children answers to anything. We only ask questions. And then we don't judge the answers. We encourage to ask for children to ask their questions, to find their own truth. So this idea of recognizing that children are not just part of the future, children are 100% of the future. So Roots of Empathy, working with the power of love in a family, a little tiny baby, that parent volunteers in the program. That parent becomes a hero overnight. All the children in the classroom and in that school, they see that family in the neighborhood. That is how you have meaningful connection of families and schools. It is bowing down at the foot of the family to realize we all start at home. Home is not just where the heart is, it's where the start is. And to have that communion of power of love from the family and power of learning from school really makes communities powerful and hopeful. The fact that we know in Roots of Empathy that we do reduce violence, aggression, and we do reduce things like bullying. But more importantly, we increase the child's capacity to care, to share, to love themselves, to love others, to connect in society. So I would like now to introduce the research part of our program. Sara Lane, who heads up research at Roots of Empathy. Hi there, Sara, is going to share with you some of the findings, because it was my belief at the very beginning that if we are going to use instructional time in school, we must be able to prove that we are having an impact on children. So Sara, please share with folks.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name's Sara Lane, and I am the manager of research and curriculum development at Roots of Empathy. And I work with both the research and curriculum teams to ensure that our programs have the greatest impact possible on children's social and emotional development and well-being. And Mary's asked me here today to speak to you and to share a bit about how research plays a role in Roots of Empathy. So I'll start by sharing a bit about what we research and how we use research. And then I'll share with you some of the results of various research findings on the impact of the Roots of Empathy program. So before I start, we created some learning outcomes for this section of the webinar. So today I'll be helping you to learn about the role that research plays in understanding the effectiveness of the Roots of Empathy program around the world, and to understand the impact of the Roots of Empathy program on children. So why do we conduct research? Well, at Roots of Empathy, we conduct and utilize research for a variety of reasons. The first and foremost being to support the development and well-being of children that we work with. We also conduct research to understand the impact of our program through a variety of methods, to understand what we're doing well and what we can work towards building, and also to understand the long-term impact of our program on children's social and emotional development and well-being. And how do we conduct research and how do we use that research? So as I mentioned, yes, yeah.
Hi, Sara.
Yeah.
Could you please present your PowerPoint presentation? We're not able to see the slides.
Oh, hang on. I've shared my screen. Hang on. 1 second. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes, now we can see.
Oh, okay. Was it not showing before?
No.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. At Roots of Empathy, we conduct our own research, and we also have a number of independent evaluations conducted on our programs. And this provides us with a wealth of knowledge to inform our programs and to share information with our Roots of Empathy communities and with the research and educational communities around the world. So 2 ways that we conduct research include our annual program evaluation and through conducting our own comparative research. So we conduct our annual program evaluation to better understand our program impact and to also inform curriculum. And we conduct comparative research to deepen our understanding of our programmatic impact. And finally, Or thirdly, we have numerous independent research studies and evaluations conducted by researchers from around the world that evaluate the impact of the Roots of Empathy program in different areas and with different populations of children. And we utilize this research to better understand how we are impacting children around the world and to further build our evidence base and finally to understand our long-term impact. Sorry. So I'll go a little bit more in depth about the annual program evaluation. We conduct the annual program evaluation at the end of each year, and we directly measure our impact in different areas throughout the world that we work. And this evaluation identifies the impact of the program on children's social well-being and social responsibility. So we collect feedback from our Roots of Empathy instructors, our volunteer parents, classroom teachers, and students themselves. And this data is collected and analyzed, and we create a regional, provincial, state, or country-focused report for each region or each country. And it details the outcomes of our program, both quantitatively and qualitatively, in relation to our program goals, and that it demonstrates the overall effectiveness of the program. So overall, this annual program evaluation informs our program curriculum, and it allows us to communicate how we're doing in different parts of the world. And it helps us to meet and respond to the needs of the children that we work with. As I mentioned before, Roots of Empathy conducts our own comparative research studies to better understand how we affect children's lives and to extend on our understanding of our programs, and also to further confirm independent research findings. So we often partner with researchers at various universities around the world to conduct our research. And most recently, we conducted a study in Ontario, Canada, to understand the impact of the Roots of Empathy program on students in schools. So I'll quickly share with you a little bit about this study and the results to give you a sample of what we do. So this study had a comparative design and took place in 2018, and we evaluated the impact of the Roots of Empathy program on children's resilience, well-being, and happiness. So the study looked at potential differences between students in grades 7 and 8 participating in the Roots of Empathy program, and then compared them to students not participating in the Roots of Empathy program or the control group. And results of this study showed that children in the Roots of Empathy group significantly increased in resilience over time, whereas children in the non-Roots of Empathy group actually demonstrated a decrease in resilience over time. And similarly, the Roots of Empathy children significantly increased in well-being, and the control group decreased in well-being over time. And finally, the Roots of Empathy children reported also an increase in happiness over time. And as with the other results, the control group, or the non-Roots of Empathy students, decreased in happiness over time. So that's a sample of what we do. And finally, we have independent research. So since the year 2000, Roots of Empathy program has been evaluated in both comparative and randomized control studies that were designed to measure changes in the behavior of students participating in the Roots of Empathy program. This research has been conducted in multiple countries and across 3 continents. And results of these studies actually show consistent and both immediate and long-term outcomes, which I'll speak to in a minute. So no matter where you live, our results are fairly consistent. Okay. So the key research findings from the various independent research studies show that Roots of Empathy strengthens factors that help to lessen or prevent future negative impacts felt by children by creating more inclusive and supportive classroom environments. So some specific findings that have come out of independent research include children in Roots of Empathy demonstrate or exhibit an increase in their social and emotional competencies, an increase in self-regulation skills and the ability to manage their emotions positively, an increase in pro-social behaviors, things such as caring, sharing, helping, and cooperating, and a decrease in aggressive behaviors, including bullying. They also demonstrate greater acceptance towards their peers and an increased sense of belonging to a caring and supportive environment, a classroom environment. And finally, they demonstrate long-term, or there are long-term effects in terms of reducing difficult behavior and aggression. So I'll speak to those long-term or the lasting impact that we have in a minute through 3 different studies. So the first study that I'd like to speak about was conducted by Santos and colleagues in Manitoba, Canada, and it had a longitudinal design and a randomized control design to evaluate the effectiveness of the Roots of Empathy program in schools across Canada. And the study assessed children in kindergarten, grades 4 and grade 8, and compared children in Roots of Empathy classrooms to children in non-Roots of Empathy classrooms. And results of this study actually showed that children demonstrated in Roots of Empathy classrooms a decrease in physical and indirect aggression, both immediately and 3 years after program completion. And finally, this study also found an increase in pro-social behaviors. So again, sharing, helping, including in children immediately following the program. A second study that I'd like to share with you was conducted by Connolly and colleagues, and it was a longitudinal evaluation conducted at Queen's University, Belfast in Northern Ireland in 2018 with children ages 8 to 9 years old. And it found that Roots of Empathy had a measurable and positive impact, demonstrating an increase in children's pro-social behavior and a reduction in aggressive and difficult behavior. So similar results to the Santos study as well. This study also showed some evidence that the reduction in difficult behavior may have been sustained for up to 3 years beyond program participation. And the final study that I'd like to talk to you about was by Latch and colleagues, and it was conducted on the impact of the Roots of Empathy program in Switzerland, and it took place from 2015 to 2017 in children in grades 3 to 6. So results of this study actually showed that children demonstrated a significant decrease in aggression and an increase in empathy when compared to children not in Roots of Empathy classrooms. And these results were actually maintained 1 year after program completion. So you can see that all 3 of these studies demonstrate the Roots of Empathy's lasting impact over time, well beyond the end of our program. And to give you a better or a more detailed picture of the Latch study, we actually have a little video that I'd like to share, an animated video that shows the long-term impact of the Swiss study. So I will reshare my screen and show you the video quickly. Is this visible? Since my slides weren't.
Team of researchers from the Bern University of Applied Sciences conducted an experimental study in the canton of Zurich. For the study, 13 classes were selected to participate in Roots of Empathy. An additional 10 classes that did not participate were included. Empathy and aggressive behavior were similarly pronounced in both groups. The researchers then conducted surveys and tests in all classes over a period of 2 years. Once at the beginning of the school year before Roots of Empathy began. The second time at the end of the school year after completion of the program. And the third time a year later to assess any long-term effects. Let's take a look at the results. First, for empathy. The graph shows the extent of change for both groups, the Roots of Empathy classes and the control classes. Now let's see what happens after 1 year. Empathy has increased significantly in the roots of empathy group and remained almost constant in the control group. This does not change even 1 year after roots of empathy was completed. The empathy values are still significantly increased in the classes that participated in the program, while they remain almost unchanged in the control groups. The same now once again for aggression. After 1 year, the aggressive behaviors in the roots of empathy classes decreased on average, while they increased slightly in the control groups. 1 year after completion, these effects still persist. The differences between the groups have even increased slightly.
Okay. That's
Love grows brain. That's probably the phrase that I'm most credited with. I'm so proud of that phrase. It's kind of the core of Roots of Empathy. It's why we use a baby, because in that first year of life, the loving relationship with the parent or parents is how that baby powers up to be a fearless learner. That literally babies learn through love. That they don't learn much of anything if they're not in a secure, attached relationship. So the attunement of the parent to the baby is what enables the baby to be fearless in how they approach novelty, how they approach people, their belief in themselves and their trust in others. So that loving relationship is basically the conduit to learning. We always try to...
Okay. Is my screen sharing? Sorry.
No, I think
Oh.
another video.
No, no.
Oh, Mary, I thought that was you. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Now I can
There we
see.
go. Got it? Okay. Finally, at Roots of Empathy, we
Can
value...
you present it, please?
Oh, it is. It's sharing. There we go. It's not sharing.
No, not yet.
Okay. There's something wrong with technology here. Is it sharing?
Now we
Okay.
can.
So at Roots of Empathy, we value research greatly. And as a result, we often host a research symposium where we invite researchers from around the world to speak on topics related to child development. So you'll find videos of these speakers' presentations on our YouTube channel. To learn more about research and the Roots of Empathy program. So you feel free to visit our website and our research section on the website at rootsofempathy.org/research. And you'll see all of the videos for the symposium at youtube.com/rootsofempathy. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the research section of our presentation. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
That's completely all right. No worries. If we are done with the presentation, we can move on to the questions and answers that some participants have posted.
Sure.
Okay. So the first question is around just the fact that before we build empathy for children, as an educator, we ourselves need to be empathetic towards others. And multiple times we fail to do so. And even when we do, it just so happens that people might take advantage of us. So how can we manage these type of situations better?
I'm not sure I understood the question. It's the beginning part of the question. I got your part. How can we understand these situations better? But I didn't understand the first part. I wonder, could you help me?
Okay. So it's written that before we build empathy for children, how can we as educators be more empathetic ourselves? So the thing that they struggle with is that when they do try to be more empathetic, people often take advantage of them. So
Yes.
they're just wondering how can they be empathetic at the same time not be taken advantage of as adults, and then how do they go about being empathetic towards their children as well?
Thank you for the question. Being empathic is not equated with being weak. Being empathic is really to be strong, because it means to connect emotionally with another person. It doesn't mean you lie down and die. It means you have the power of that connection. And just because you care and you feel does not make you weak. And I appreciate the question in that if you have this ability to identify and care, that you might be seen as someone who's an easy touch. That's not necessarily the case at all. And it makes you an advocate. If you can identify and understand how it feels to be homeless, for example, it gives you the power to be able to do something about it. Whereas if you didn't understand how it felt and couldn't empathize with homelessness, nothing would change. So having empathy can actually be a motor for positive change and for connection. And being empathic to our children is probably one of the best things we can do. We also have to be kind to ourselves. And I think from a parenting perspective, being able to connect with how our children feel, if we realize that our children's behavior is really just a manifestation of how they feel. So that a child who is giving the parent a hard time by fighting with siblings or being destructive or being not agreeing to do anything the parent asks them, first of all, the parent needs to think, is this a child who's tired or hungry? Eliminate the physical things. And in other words, what is this behavior telling you? Because during the pandemic, children's behavior has really, parents tell us all over the world, children have been mildly depressed. And what is the behavior of a depressed child? Some of them hide when you can't even get through to them, and some of them become aggressive. So I think self-empathy is really important, and not to equate empathy with weakness, but equate it with strength.
Thank you. Another question is around how to build empathy during online classes. So a lot of our teachers here today are required to teach online, and I am assuming that they mostly just take math, science, etc. lessons online. So they're just wondering, how can we go about teaching empathy when they have such a short time with students online?
I think it's really difficult, but great that we ask the right questions. In life, it's not the answer, it's the question. So the idea of, first of all, is how do you reach the students? Because you can't teach them until you reach them. So to start off every single session with a checking in emotionally, how is everybody feeling today? And whether you have a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or create some sort of way. And it's not just connecting with children, it's connecting with one another, that we have to have some sort of an emotional check-in, and maybe some sort of narrative that somebody would share something that happened to them, because we all respond to narrative. It connects us. So if, you know, sometimes people say you have to have a joke or a laugh together. It's not about a joke, it's about emotional connection. And if it's a laugh, great. But I think that is the key thing. And also you can read body language online, not as well as when you're together, but really important to look at what sort of engagement are you getting. Are people reading? Are they doing their emails while they're online? How can you make sure that they are with you? And how can you build breaks that will allow you to come together in a different way apart from the instruction part? I think actually the teachers are heroes in the midst of all of this. Trying to teach online is a very challenging thing. It's not so rewarding unless you can really connect with the learner as you would if you were teaching in the classroom.
Yes, thank you. The next question is around assessments. People are wondering how you go about approaching impact evaluation. Is it diagnostic, and then do you have year-end assessments, or is there any other way? And if possible, could you share a sample of one such assessment?
So if you'd like, Mary, I can answer that question.
Yes,
Yeah. So we approach our evaluation. We do year-end evaluations at the end of our school year, and as I mentioned before, we collect feedback from everyone involved in the program, from students to teachers to volunteer parents, and instructors, Roots of Empathy instructors. And we bring all of that information together and we analyze the data and we share the results of that data with everyone in the program through the form of a report at the end of the school year once we've collected everything, if that makes sense.
And that's the evaluation, and Sarah shared the peer-reviewed published scientific research, which is separate. But what Sarah shared there is that every year we survey everybody. And I think we have our deepest learnings from the surveying of the children. Even the little ones who can't write, they respond in their art, and we collect that and interpret that and share it back. One of the things to share with the people, we asked the children, what can Roots of Empathy teach the world? And that is, the children's answers should be at every policy table, because they say things like, everybody should care about everybody else. We shouldn't be mean to everybody. Everybody has a right to belong. They say brilliant things.
Thank you so much. The next question is just around what else does the program entail? So people have gotten a good understanding of the research and the impact, and people are just wondering that where can they access the curriculum or where can they check the details of the program as such? If you could just quickly share that.
Yes, I'm happy to respond. Roots of Empathy really is an experiential program. There is a 4-day training. There is in-person mentoring. There is professional development. And there's a huge process of implementation integrity. We don't sell Roots of Empathy curriculum. We only work with a region who decides to implement the program. Could be a school district, it could be a country, but we don't give it away or sell it. It's only if someone commits deeply, and it's not a one-off, it has to be a considerable group where we can go deep. We're not interested in wallpapering the world. We are interested in going deep and having a measurable impact over time. So it's not just, and I feel badly about that, because many teachers say, well, I'd like to do that. I'd like to bring that into my classroom. And unfortunately, we don't operate like that. We couldn't ever ensure integrity. So the one thing about Roots of Empathy, we promise the results wherever we go. So we have to have basically a commitment from a province, a country, a state, a region before we go. So the curriculum isn't for sale. I mean, there's a book I've written that speaks more to the philosophy and the knowledge base which informed it. But I'm sorry for the person who asked the question. I can't help there.
Thank you so much. We're actually at the end of our session for today. We would like to thank you, Mary and Sarah, for being generous with your time and expertise. I now request both of you to quickly share your thoughts on the webinar.
Well, you know what I would like to share on the webinar is a little 45-second video that is a wave and a kiss to all of you, because it's a little scene from the final class. Roots of Empathy goes over the whole year, and the little baby May is saying goodbye to all of the children for the last time. And I think your webinar is a brilliant way to connect people in this challenging time. And I think teachers are so important, and for them to be able to connect with one another is valuable. Sarah has the link, and that will be my farewell and evaluation. And then Sarah, I would ask you to share. So can you run that for me, Sarah? We've had a little bit of problem here. I don't see Sarah on the screen. Is she getting that ready? You know, one of the things also I wanted to say was that children are really the cartographers of the future. They are drawing all the maps. And today they're in our classroom. So I think it's really an amazing thing that we encourage teachers to keep reaching and to keep teaching, because they're the first responders in many cases. You know, the family, obviously, the deepest responder, but not every family is in a position to give children what they need, and sometimes it's up to the teacher. So whether you're reaching out online, a friendly face to a child and a recognition can make the world of a difference. So Sarah, how are you doing with that little video that we were going to show?
I think Sarah has dropped off the call.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. I think she's having real difficulties there. Yvonne might be on the call, and I don't know if you want to share it, Yvonne.
Yvonne is here. I can see Yvonne on the call.
Sure, I'll share right now.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that we lost Sarah. She's been amazing in collecting across the world and giving reports on children's well-being and mental health as a result of the wishes they make at the end of the year for their baby are stunning, and she's put them to, here you go.
Yvonne, we can't see your screen.
Boy, it certainly takes a lot of empathy to run one of these.
It won't let me share the screen.
It won't let you. Well, not to worry. It was just the idea that this was a classroom that we filmed accidentally, where they were having their goodbye to baby May, who they came to know and love over the course of the school year. And she suddenly started kissing all of the children. We sing the baby in every time and sing the baby out and build solidarity through song. And in this case, she surprised everybody and kissed every single child.
Goodbye, baby May, we'll see you soon. See you soon. See you soon. Goodbye, baby May, we'll see you soon. See you very soon. Goodbye, baby May, we'll see you soon. See you soon. See you soon. Goodbye, baby May. See you soon. See you very soon. Goodbye, baby. We'll see you soon. See you soon.
Enough there just to give you the idea that joy and love belong in every classroom. And when children are happy and feeling safe and joyful and a sense of belonging, there's no limit to what teachers can help them learn.
Thank you so much for that. To reach out to them, you can write to them at mail@rootsofempathy.org. Please indicate the subject line connection to Firki Webinar. This information will be pasted on the chat window shortly. Our next webinar is a panel discussion on inertia of change in hostile spaces by Kat Katha, scheduled for August 25th. Before you leave, please take a minute to give us feedback on your learning experience on the webinar today. And as mentioned earlier, you will be receiving the participation certificate once you fill in that feedback form.
Thank you, Anu, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mary. Thanks,
Bye.
Sarah. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.